It happened on a Sunday morning, one of those deceptively perfect mornings where the world feels still and safe, like nothing bad could possibly happen. The sun was streaming in through the thin white curtains, dust dancing lazily in the light, and the faint smell of coffee was drifting from the kitchen. I was sitting cross-legged on the couch in my oversized robe, phone in hand, mindlessly scrolling through Instagram reels about recipes I'd never cook. It felt like any other quiet weekend at home. I remember hearing the bedroom door open behind me and the soft creak of the floorboards as Ryan walked toward me. I didn't even look up, just sipped my coffee, assuming he was coming over to plop down next to me like he always did, maybe kiss my cheek and ask what I wanted for breakfast. But the silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating, and I sensed something was horribly wrong even before I turned my head. When I looked up, there he was standing across the room, not beside me where he usually belonged. His face was pale, his eyes locked onto me with an intensity that made my heart thunder against my ribs. In his hand was my phone, held up like an accusation, the screen still lit with the damning evidence I'd forgotten to erase the night before. I couldn't breathe. My entire body felt like it was turning to ice and fire at the same time. He stood there in his faded t-shirt and gray sweatpants, the same clothes he had slept in, but he looked like a stranger I'd never seen before. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought it might shatter. You guess. His eyes, once so soft and loving, were empty now, like he'd gone somewhere far away just to survive the moment. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. My tongue felt thick, useless. All I could do was stare at him, trying to calculate how bad it was. How much he had read, what he knew, if there was any chance to spin it or lie my way out. But deep down, I already knew it was over. I had slipped up. I had let the mask drop. He finally saw the truth I had been hiding for 2 years. He didn't shout. He didn't throw anything or call me names. Somehow that made it worse. The quiet was deafening. After what felt like a lifetime, he finally spoke. His voice was low, almost a whisper, and it cracked like something inside him had snapped beyond repair. He said I forgot to delete it this time. Just 7 words, but they cut deeper than any screaming ever could. I felt the world tilt under me, felt the walls of our living room close in until I was gasping for air. My eyes darted to the screen he held, the last text thread with my boss, the one where we were planning our next hotel meetup, filled with things I could never explain away. I tried to reach for him, desperate to close the distance, but he stepped back like my touch burned. My mind spiraled, searching for excuses, pathetic explanations, anything to take it all back. I heard myself croak out the words everyone says in movies and trashy soap operas. It's not what it looks like. Even as I said it, I hated myself because it was exactly what it looked like. It was worse. The room felt cold, the morning light suddenly harsh and glaring like a spotlight on everything I'd done. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd faint. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't even bother wiping them away because I could already see the end in his eyes. He was gone. Or at least the version of him who loved and trusted me was gone. I wanted to scream, to throw myself at his feet, to promise I would fix it, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen in that horrible moment, aware that I had reached the point of no return. The smell of coffee turned sour. The warmth of our apartment felt like a cruel joke, and outside, the birds kept singing as if nothing had happened. Time had stopped for us. But the world just kept spinning. I had been so careful for so long, erasing every message, covering every lie, balancing on the knife's edge of 2 lives, and all it took was one mistake, one moment of carelessness, for the truth to rip everything apart. Standing there, I realized with gut-churning clarity that I hadn't just betrayed him, I had destroyed him. And in that same breath, I knew I had destroyed myself too. I remember the first time I walked into the office and laid eyes on James. He was standing at the end of the corridor, talking to the CEO, tall and confident in a tailored navy suit, smiling like he owned the building. I had been so nervous that day, clutching my resume and a cheap tote bag, trying to hide how out of place I felt. He looked over, caught my eye for a split second, and I swear my knees went weak. It wasn't love or lust right away. It was this strange gravitational pull. Like I knew he was the kind of person who could chew you up and spit you out, but you'd still thank him for the attention. My first weeks on the job were a blur of trying to prove myself, staying late to double-check every report, memorizing every client's preferences. James was relentless, always finding tiny mistakes in my work, never praising anything, just nodding coolly or raising an eyebrow. I used to go home and vent to Ryan about how insufferable my new boss was. He everyone else how he never cracked a smile that wasn't razor sharp. Ryan would listen patiently, rub my feet, tell me not to let it get to me. Back then, it felt like Ryan and I were on the same team, fighting the stress of my new job together. But somewhere along the way, that shifted. The first thaw with James happened when I nailed a big presentation. He called me into his office afterward, eyes bright, voice low, and told me I'd surprised him. The compliment was so rare it felt like sunlight in the middle of winter. I found myself replaying his words all night. Then he started offering to help me prepare for meetings, giving me advice about office politics, pulling me aside to share inside information about other departments. We'd stay late together in the office, our conversations drifting from marketing strategies to life stories, childhood memories, even secret fears. It was like peeling back layers neither of us let anyone else see. The spark was there, electric and dangerous, but I told myself we were just connecting professionally, just two ambitious people bonding over work. I thought I could keep it in that box, neatly separated from my life with Ryan. I was dead wrong. The conference trip was the tipping point. I can still feel the tightness in my chest when I remember it. We were staying at a hotel downtown, both of us keyed up after a 12-hour day of meetings and forced networking. We met in the hotel bar to debrief, 2 whiskeys each, the conversation easy, flowing, too honest. When our hands brushed reaching for the check, it was like a fuse was lit. I should have gotten up. I should have gone back to my room. But instead, I let him pull me close, our lips meeting like it was inevitable, like the universe had been building to this. The first kiss was rough, hungry, desperate. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. After that night, everything changed. The next morning, I woke up in his bed, heart pounding with both excitement and dread. I kept thinking about Ryan waiting for my good morning text. But instead of feeling sick enough to stop, I felt drunk on the adrenaline of it all. Back home, I threw myself into the routine with Ryan like nothing had happened. I cooked dinner, watched Netflix, kissed him goodnight, but part of me was always somewhere else, replaying secret moments with James. I started living for texts from my boss, checking my phone every few minutes, inventing excuses to stay late or leave early. I remember once Ryan came to surprise me at work with lunch, and I almost had a panic attack, thinking he'd see the way James looked at me when I walked into his office. It was a high-stakes game, and I convinced myself I was clever enough to keep both worlds spinning. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I told myself Ryan would never find out that we were solid enough to survive whatever guilt I buried. I told myself I could stop whenever I wanted, but each time I tried, James would call me into his office, and one look at him would erase all my resolve. I started craving his approval, needing his attention like a drug. I became addicted not just to him, but to the feeling of being seen, wanted, powerful. Meanwhile, I drifted further from Ryan, giving him vague excuses, pushing him away whenever he asked if something was wrong. I hated myself for it, but not enough to end it. I was stuck in a cycle I couldn't break, convinced I was in control even as everything unraveled. Living a double life isn't something you plan. It creeps up on you, piece by piece, until suddenly you're a stranger in your own home. That's what happened to me. At first, it was small things. Avoiding eye contact with Ryan when I got back from work, showering longer to wash off the guilt, staying glued to my phone like it was a lifeline. Then it turned into bigger things, missing dinner dates, pretending to be sick so I could skip family events, and making up entire stories about client meetings that never happened. The truth is, I started building 2 separate versions of myself, and I became so good at slipping between them that I almost forgot who the real me even was. At home, I was tired, distracted, emotionally absent. Ryan would come home with takeout and a bottle of wine, thinking a movie night would fix whatever invisible wall was growing between us. I'd force a smile, pretend to be grateful, sit through the evening counting down the minutes until I could fake a headache and crawl into bed early. And every time he said, I love you, something inside me twisted painfully because I knew he meant it with his whole heart, and I no longer deserved it. At work, I was someone else entirely, confident, vibrant, witty, even flirty. James made me feel like I was the center of gravity, like the entire room bent around me. The tension between us became a private language. He'd brush past me in the hallway, fingers grazing just enough to make me shiver. Sometimes he'd whisper things in passing that made me flush for hours. I'd wear certain dresses just because I knew he liked them. Every time I checked my phone and saw his name light up the screen, it gave me this jolt of adrenaline, a thrill that nothing in my actual relationship could match anymore. It wasn't love, not in the real sense. It was obsession, ego, escapism. But I didn't care. I was addicted to being wanted. I started telling myself Ryan wouldn't understand me the way James did, that our relationship was starting to feel like an obligation rather than a choice. I built justifications in my head for every betrayal. I told myself Ryan had changed, that he was too soft, too predictable, too safe. But in reality, he was just stable, and I was too lost to appreciate it. He still cooked for me, asked how my day was, kissed my forehead before bed, even when I barely responded. He was trying to hold on while I was quietly letting go. The worst part was that I knew he could feel it. He'd ask if something was wrong, and I'd say I was tired. He'd offer to plan a weekend getaway, and I'd say I was swamped with work. He started shrinking around me, growing quieter, walking on eggshells in his own home. And I hated that. I hated the power I had over his heart. But I didn't stop. I kept choosing James every time. There were days I'd leave Ryan's arms in the morning and end up in James's arms by lunch. I remember once after a late meeting with James, I came home and Ryan was waiting at the door with a cup of chamomile tea because I'd told him I had a long day. I stared at the cup in his hands and felt my stomach turn, not from love, but from shame so deep I thought I'd throw up right there. But I didn't say anything. I took the cup, thanked him, kissed his cheek, and went to bed next to him like I wasn't breaking his heart slowly every day. I don't know how I kept it going for so long. I think part of me believed I'd end it before it ever got out of control. That I'd wake up one day and just stop. But it doesn't work that way. When you build a house of lies, every day you stay inside it is another day closer to the collapse. And the collapse came. I just didn't expect it to come so quietly. Not with screaming, not with a fight, but with a look in Ryan's eyes that told me he already knew. Long before the message on my phone gave me away, he'd been watching me fade. He just didn't want to believe it. And neither did I. Let me know when you're ready for part 4, or if you'd like all 4 parts compiled together in one complete script. Back to that Sunday morning when the walls I'd so carefully built crumbled in the time it took for Ryan to hold up my phone. In the silence after he spoke, I felt a rushing in my ears, like the ocean was roaring inside my skull. I knew I needed to say something, anything, but every word felt cheap and hollow. Ryan's face was unreadable, but his eyes were full of something I'd never seen before. A cold finality that terrified me more than if he'd screamed or thrown something. He turned and walked to the bedroom, moving with this eerie calm, like he was sleepwalking through a nightmare. I stood in the middle of the living room, frozen as he shoved clothes into a backpack. My voice finally cracked through my throat as I called his name, but he didn't answer. I ran to him, grabbed his arm, begging him to just look at me, to yell at me, to do anything but shut down. He turned slowly, and the emptiness in his eyes made my knees buckle. He asked if any of it had been real, and the words cut through me like a blade. My mouth opened, but no answer came. The silence between us said everything. The truth was I didn't know anymore. I had convinced myself I could have both worlds for so long that I'd lost track of what I felt, or who I even was. Ryan pulled his arm free, zipped up his bag, and walked past me without another word. I followed him out to the street, barefoot, hair a mess, tears streaming down my face as I pleaded with him to stay. The neighbors were outside watering their lawns or sipping coffee, and they watched as my entire life unraveled on the front steps. Ryan didn't look back. He got into his car, slammed the door, and drove away with the backpack sitting in the passenger seat like a ghost of the life we'd shared. When the taillights disappeared, I collapsed on the sidewalk, sobbing so hard I thought my ribs would crack Back inside, the apartment felt foreign, like I'd stumbled into a stranger's home. The walls were filled with photos of us smiling, tickets from concerts we'd gone to, little mementos that mocked me now. I wanted to smash them all, to destroy the evidence of what I'd ruined, but I just sank onto the floor and stared at the cold coffee sitting on the table, untouched. Days blurred together after that. I called and texted Ryan dozens of times, but he never answered. I checked his social media, hoping for any sign he was okay, but he'd blocked me everywhere. Mutual friends said he was staying with his sister across town, but he didn't want to see me. Meanwhile, work felt like a twisted joke. James acted normal, business as usual, like nothing had happened. I tried to pretend too, showing up on time, forcing smiles and meetings, but I was hollow inside. Then 3 weeks later, James called me into his office and told me he'd been promoted, transferred to another city. He said it so casually, like he was reading a weather report. I waited for him to say he wanted me to come with him, to start over together, to make all the sacrifices I'd made mean something. But he just looked at me with polite indifference and said this might be for the best. My mouth went dry, my heart dropping to the floor. I realized in that moment that I had never been anything more to him than a convenient distraction, a fling he could compartmentalize. I'd burned my life to the ground for a man who could walk away without a second thought. Standing in his office, I felt the full weight of my choices crush me. I went home to an empty apartment that no longer felt like home, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the blank walls for hours. I thought about how easily I'd lied, how I'd convinced myself I could control the fallout, how blind I'd been to the reality that the truth always finds a way to claw its way out. In the end, I lost everything. The man who loved me unconditionally, the life we'd built, the self-respect I'd once had. The twist wasn't just that Ryan found out or that James left. It was that I had been lying to myself even more than I'd lied to them. I thought I was strong, smart, untouchable, but the truth was I was a coward hiding behind secrets. Now, every morning I wake up to silence and the sickening awareness that I destroyed my own happiness, and there's no one left to blame but me.